The Fast Performance Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Cole Thomas. On this week's episode, we have Peter Bayer, good friend of Fast, good friend of everybody here. Everybody who, if you follow us on social media, you know exactly who Peter Bayer is. We talk about his story from being a non-projectable high school player all the way to being a 9th round pick. His whole journey is very fascinating. I think you guys will really enjoy it. Then we talk about, he lives down in Arizona right now. What are the differences between Colorado baseball players and Arizona baseball players? And then we finish out with just what advice he gives to players like you guys, everyone listening, what you guys can take away and learn throughout to help your careers as you progress. It's a great conversation. I know you guys will all enjoy it. Here he is, Peter Bayer. All right, Peter, thank you for coming in onto the show.
Yeah, nice to be here, and obviously from working at Fast for so long, it's nice to come on and talk to you again. So a lot of stuff
Right.
we can go ahead and dig into.
I know, right? So for guys who may not know who you are, and like I've said this with Brandon, I've said this with Seth, most people who follow Fast or follow me, I would be shocked if they have no idea who you are. But, for guys who don't know, give us like a little rundown of, your background and everything.
Yeah, so I was actually drafted in the 2016 draft, a 9th round pick by the Rays, and then right after that, I played my first minor league season, and I actually reached out to Jason about. This was right around like when the season was kind of wrapping up, so kind of end of August. I reached out to Jason because I had previously kind of trained at his original facility, which was obviously, before the one we even, trained at, just kind of like down the street. And reached out to him, and I honestly just said, I needed a place to train in the off season, and I was also kind of looking for work, and he was willing to hop on a conversation with me and bring me on as a coach over at Fast, and we just kind of went from there. And then after that, I played minor leagues through about 2021. And then I played a little bit of independent ball. I played in Mexico, and then I was essentially working as a trainer at Fast from 2016 all the way through about 2021-ish. I don't exactly know when that ended, but I've worked with a lot of you guys. I worked with like a lot of the athletes that you're currently training, and always kind of popping in still. So yeah, I mean I've played minor leagues with the Rays, with the A's. I signed to the Reds for a little bit, and played in an independent ball league, played in the LMB in Mexico, and then essentially I've just been kind of training athletes as a, almost a full-time thing, kind of off-season wise. I worked for Driveline Baseball as an online remote training coach. I worked a little bit on the training floor there, and kind of just been all over the baseball space for the past 10 years or so, probably, since when people followed my journey from playing and progressing through all of that stuff.
So you were let's go back a little bit further, because I feel the majority of the people who listen to the show are Colorado people. So there's some let's go back to the high school experience a little bit. You were you're at Regis. What was your, playing days at Regis like? What was your college recruiting like? Because you were your former Division I baseball player / D2. Kind of what was that all like?
Yeah, so I ended up actually playing at Regis. I was originally kind of scheduled to I was probably going to go to Ponderosa, to be honest. I was pretty much all in on being a Pondo guy.
This was for context, we can also say I was a Douglas County guy, so our high schools are literally down the street from each other.
Yeah, so
we probably played each other in high school, but we didn't know each other in high school.
We didn't. But yeah, I was originally going to go to Pondo, so 8th grade, middle school, I was playing on every single Ponderosa feeder team. And what actually happened was one of their coaches got fired, and there was kind of a huge mess going on with a little bit of their program, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I was looking into going into Chaparral, and then I took the exam at Regis because I just thought, what the heck, I'll try to, take it and see if I get in, and ended up taking that. I got into the school, and I actually kind of, one of the main reasons I went there was when I was like 6 years old for my first sports that I ever played, like Hawks, youth, football,
Yeah.
with AYL, all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Dad,
Old A.
yeah,
Oh
my dad got a call from Walt Weiss, obviously, and he said that he was
yeah.
going to be my football coach. And my dad was like, Walt Weiss, the baseball player, like, why are you coaching football? Like, what's going on? But then, like, we actually ended up, I played my first, season of like youth sports was Hawks football. He was actually my head coach, and I knew he was going to be over at Regis. We developed like a really good relationship through when I was young, playing youth sports, all the way through football, baseball. I played with Brody, his son, and I knew they were going to go over to Regis, so we had a conversation, and I thought for my baseball and for sports, like aspirations, I thought it was kind of the best fit for me, and ended up going over there. And it was kind of a weird thing because Regis wasn't really good at sports. If you kind of followed them in like the 2010s, like early 2010,
Yeah.
like early 2010s, they were okay. They weren't anything special. And they kind of just sold me on like, hey, we're actually going to have like a lot of good athletes coming in. And I guess you could call that recruiting. It wasn't really recruiting. It was more just like, they talked to me and they were just like, hey, we're trying to develop something really cool. Like, we actually think we're going to be good. And I just said, I'm going to try it. And, I played basketball. I played football all the way through. I played basketball through my junior year. I played football through my sophomore year. And then ended up just focusing on baseball over there after my junior year. And it's funny because in my youth days, I didn't really pitch much. I think a lot of people who, pitch at higher levels throw a lot when they're kids, and they're pitching in all these games when they're 10, 11, 12 years old. And I was kind of lucky where I honestly like sucked. Like, I wasn't a very good pitcher when I was younger. I didn't throw hard. I was kind of known as like the guy that would just come in and like throw a bunch of like, I had this like little like split change thing that I like used to throw when I was a kid, and I would just like come in and throw that, and like just didn't really even throw fastballs, because if I threw fastballs, they were just getting crushed.
Right.
And I was mostly like an infielder, and I grew a lot obviously when I got into high school, and I think it was kind of a blessing in disguise where even my freshman year at Regis, like on the freshman, like sophomore teams, I was like the three hitter. I was playing third, playing first. I was pitching, but I wasn't like the best pitcher. It was like I started kind of throwing a little bit harder, but I was primarily like playing the field. And I was honestly focused more on basketball at this point, because like growing up, I was like really, really good friends with a lot of really good basketball players, and I played basketball with like really high level guys, and I thought,
Future all NBA defense, Derek White.
yeah. So Derek was like a really, really good friend of mine. Like, we grew up
Yeah.
together, and we still talk, every
Yeah.
little bit. But yeah, so I was just focused on basketball when I went to Regis too. And, I was like, I'm going to play baseball because I like it, but, we'll see. And then as my, high school years went on, I started kind of growing and throwing a little bit harder. And I ended up, my sophomore year, I was like pitching on JV, and I got really, really good. I think my sophomore year, I started, I was kind of one of the first. My dad actually did this, but he was like looking into all the Texas baseball ranch stuff. And he was like,
Yeah.
if you're going to start pitching, and he was like on the forefront of that, where like I had no idea. Like, I didn't do any sort of plyo balls. We all thought they slowed your arm down. I was just, playing catch and like, doing the typical like arm across stretches and arm circles, and like, how everybody trained back then, and like up, down, and out mechanics, like making sure you're like on top of the ball, like back here. Like,
Oh yeah, you got to take the apple or keep the snake fangs away.
yeah,
Or
like that's all I knew. And
you just like sit there. I sit there every once in a while. I'm like, God, we were so fucking stupid.
I know it's wild, and that's the thing that I was always like, if we were like early in high school or before then and we knew all the stuff we knew now, like how good like obviously nobody knew, but like, we
Yeah,
could have
yeah.
been way better. And that's kind of
Well,
something.
that's something I tell guys all the time now. Like you guys, like the guys that we train, you down in Arizona or wherever, when you're here or me here, just go like, you guys don't really realize how fucking lucky you have it and how easy you
Yeah.
have it now.
Yeah.
Like where you and I in high school, we're just fucking guessing
Yeah.
the entire time. We're just like, oh, I think that's cool or I think that's good, and you know, I tell guys all the time, like now everyone has a radar gun everywhere at every facility. Whereas when you and I were in high school, was if you even dared to ask how hard you were throwing, your coach would be like, "Shut the fuck up and go throw a strike."
Yeah. No, and that's how it was. Like that's how I kind of was raised up on pitching, and then I
Yeah,
think it was about like after my sophomore year of high school, my dad took me out to Houston, and I went to the Texas Baseball Ranch, and that's when I first like started like actually questioning the norm. And
yeah,
it was like, and Ron Wolforth is obviously one of the guy at the probably like the forefront of all of this new school baseball technology that like probably doesn't get the credit for it, because he was the one that kind of taught like everybody in the space all of this stuff about weighted ball training, regardless of like you agreed with his methodology of how he does it. But I started doing all of that, and honestly, like my velocity in high school was like when I was a sophomore, I was probably throwing in the low 80s to like mid 80s. And then when I got to my junior years, when I like really took off as a pitcher, kind of after that, was like mid 80s to 88. Like I was like an 85 to 87, 88 guy. And I think in high school, back when we played, obviously 2011, 2012, that was good. Like that was like at the top of velocity that you're going to kind of see at the high school level. Like if you go back 10 years, it's crazy how much velocity has like gotten insane at the high school level these days. Where there's everybody's like throwing like upper 80s and 90s in high school now. And
yeah,
it never was like that. It was like if this guy's throwing above 85, like he's throwing pretty hard. And then my junior year, we were using the BSR bats, which was like super fun to pitch with, obviously in high school when you're like using those, that especially in Colorado at the altitude, or just like anything that's getting put in the air.
yeah,
And all of our games were like 15-10. And our team, we were stacked in the lineup. We won state championship my junior year. I only pitched at that point because to play on varsity, I wasn't good enough to like hit. I was just pitching. And then in like summer ball games, I would hit, but like, whatever. I just decided to kind of focus on pitching at that point. Mostly just because like I thought I could have aspirations, and I was just like, I might as well just like sell out for this.
yeah.
And then, senior year, I was very, very successful in high school. I believe I was like 8-0 with like some absurd, ERA. I wasn't throwing like, I was still, I was like sitting 87. Like I definitely didn't hit 90 in high school. And I went to believe it was like I went to some showcase in Florida. I actually wasn't even really playing in a lot of the like summer games. I had a couple offers to go pitch at JUCOs. Like I could have went to like Iowa Western, which was like a top JUCO in the nation, and then I was like pitching in the Arizona Fall Classic. I was playing for the like Rockies scout team or something like that, and I pitched against this team in Texas, and I did pretty well. And after the game, the coach just said, "Hey, do you want to come pitch in this tournament with Florida with us? Like you're just gonna throw like 3 or 4 innings, and then you can just like fly back." And I did that, and then that's when University of Richmond like was there, obviously like East Coast. They saw me, and I got an offer to pitch there. And honestly, like, and I kind of tell people that I regret the decision a little bit, because like I feel like I just wait, and we didn't know what we know now, but I only looked at the concept of like, this is a Division I school, like this is my one D1 offer, like I'm gonna do that because it's D1 baseball, and I didn't. Yeah,
It's still even today. How many guys still have that impression.
Yeah, and obviously, like we can go into it later, but that situation like completely did not work out for me. And I mean, obviously, I got to where I did in baseball, so like I don't want to say like, oh, I regret this decision, but I feel like things could have been like a little bit different for my playing career if I like would have went that JUCO route, if I would have like went to an Iowa Western or went to a JUCO where like I feel like I was a person like more suited to just be like, you know, I'm going to sell out for baseball anyway, so I might as well just like go for it rather than like try to go that route. But no, I got to where I did. But yeah, that was kind of my high school experience was like, you know, I didn't really take pitching seriously until like my sophomore, my junior year. And, you know, I'm thankful obviously for, you know, my dad to like realize like, hey, this, you know, person out in Texas that I had no idea what it was, like might, you know, actually be able to help you. It's like very unique. And, you know, he always was kind of at the forefront of like all of my thought process with, you know, baseball and, you know, finding all these unique ways to train. Cause I remember back when I was like a freshman and sophomore in high school too, I was going and getting hitting lessons from Epstein, and he was
Yeah, yeah.
teaching us like up, like you know, trying to hit the ball in the air, you know, tactics where, you know, where we're trying to like, you know, get like lift the ball. And I was like doing all, I like was meeting him in his garage and like meeting him in his basement and like he had like a cage set up and I was just like doing all these weird hitting drills where like it was rotational hitting and like trying. So everything that I was doing, I think early in high school kind of led me to like the path that I took of like trying to find the next kind of like unique thing or being at the forefront of like almost just like using my career as a player as a little bit of an experiment to like deviate from what everybody else was doing because I just didn't ever want to be like doing what everybody else was doing because I just knew that like what everybody else did like didn't work and I was like I'd rather like fail doing something like unique that's different than like just do this like set stuff that I know isn't going to get me any better. So
Right.
yeah, that was kind of my high school experience, I guess.
So I mean, you've told the story God knows how many times, but it's like, what was, you know, you can keep it as brief as you want to, but like, what was your experience with the Division One over at Richmond? Because you
Yeah,
started out really well, and then it kind of just there was a weird cascade, and there's a story you can delve into as deep as you want to be. But yeah, it's like you started out really well, and then weird circumstances happened, and kind of just fell apart.
yeah. You know, I started out there my freshman year. I pitched pretty well for a freshman. Had a lot of innings. I was kind of a midweek starter and would would fill in for a Sunday start if we had like an injury or something like that. So I did get a lot of innings my freshman year. And I really just kind of continued the same way I kind of pitched my senior year in high school, which was, you know, a mid to upper 80s kind of guy where like I had pretty good command and like just, you know, I knew how to pitch. And I was okay. And I knew that like if I continued that trajectory as a player, I could have had like a decently successful college career, but then I would have been done. So essentially after my freshman year, I started to kind of really realized that like development is more important than kind of like results at with my age. And you know, my sophomore year, um, I started I essentially started like doing a lot of weighted ball training and like doing a lot more of like the drive line type stuff about my sophomore year when it was like way before like really anybody even knew what it was. So like, you know, I'm out there during practice like before people show up like throwing plyo balls against a wall. My pitching coach is like looking at me like I'm crazy, like what are you doing? And it was really weird because I felt like I was like fighting this battle against the coaches all the time where it was like I put all this pressure on myself to be like, if I don't perform well and I'm like doing all this unique kind of training, they're just like never going to throw me. So I like, it was like a mental battle for me where like I was putting way too much pressure on myself. And I also kind of knew that, you know, And something that I guess to backtrack a little bit, when I first started kind of training with Driveline, I talked to Kyle and like I went out to the like original facility in like Puyallup, Washington, and I was like training in a batting cage.
Yeah.
I was essentially like a
Carpet floors, and
yeah, I was basically like I believed in this thing before people kind of knew what it was, and
yeah,
it was kind of the OG Twitter where like not many people were really even on Twitter in like 2014 ish.
right,
It was still kind of new, and I was on there and I found it was like Driveline base. It was his account was Driveline Bases, and I was like going through his tweets and I was reading all of this stuff, and I sent him emails and I was like calling him on the phone, and we were just talking about what I can do about my training because I knew after my sophomore year, over that summer, I was going to go train there and I was going to train with them. So during my sophomore year, like before I like really went out there, I was still kind of like doing all of this unique training. It was kind of like a remote program where I was like doing like velocity training during the season, and like he basically told me like, look, like you're probably gonna get way worse at pitching, but you're gonna get way better in the long run. And I was like, I don't care, like that's fine. Like I don't like I was kind of I told myself like I wanted to get to pro baseball and I wanted to kind of start throwing as hard as I possibly could and like reach my genetic ceiling. Like that was my ultimate goal, was like I'm not going to be able to play beyond college unless I start throwing harder, because I was throwing 87, 88 miles an hour, and I just knew that obviously wasn't going to cut it. So I just kind of told myself like if I get worse in the short term at pitching, like I'll be really good. But my coaches were kind of, you know, I started going out there in games and I was walking a lot more guys, and I was messing with my delivery in games, and I was doing all of these things that you would kind of mostly do in the off season, but I was doing it during the season. And I put my development before kind of my performance, and it really just led to like a complete disaster, honestly. Like I did it my sophomore year. I barely pitched, and then when I did pitch, it wasn't good. But then my junior year got there, and I started throwing way harder, but I still like wasn't good all the time. I was really, really inconsistent. So to give you a little timeline, I pitched my whole sophomore year kind of remote training with a lot of Driveline stuff. After my sophomore year, I went out there for like a month over the summer and just like learned everything and trained there. And then I was playing summer ball, but I was being smart about it. So after my freshman year of college, this was my mindset back then. So like my freshman year of college, I played a full year of summer ball too, like pitched the whole summer, and I didn't get any better. Like I just was, I was throwing 80, 86, 87, and I was decently good. And then I did that over the summer, and the same thing happened. Like it was just, it was just getting more reps, but it didn't really get me any better at pitching, and it definitely wasn't going to like progress me to the next level. So, after my sophomore year, I started, I would like train for most of the time, and then I would go and like, pitch like 15 or 20 innings of summer ball just because I needed to get some reps in. But like I started kind of like putting my, and what we preach, kind of like putting my development before, playing games in the summer. I did that a lot. I started doing that a lot after my sophomore year. Go into my junior year, and the same kind of, like my first outing was a start against Maryland, like one of our first games. Maryland was like a top like 15 team in the nation. Like Brandon Lau from the Rays is batting third in the lineup. And I pitched like 5 innings, and like I gave up like 1 run. I struck out 8 guys, and my coaches like started believing in like the training that I was doing over the summer, because I kind of told them like, hey, I'm doing all this weighted ball training, and my first start I'm throwing like 88 to 90, 91 now. Like the velocity's getting a lot better. I started like actually knowing what like a high spin fastball is, because we had no idea what that meant back then, and I kind of utilized like, oh, I'm throwing 4 seams. I should stop throwing 2 seams and like throw 4 seams and like throw them high in the zone. And like we didn't know what that was, in the mid like 2014, 2015. We had no idea what that was, and we didn't even have like slow-mo cameras to like watch the ball out of the hand at that point. It was just like I literally was out at driveline. I'm like throwing pitches off the mound, and Kyle's like, "Oh, it looks like your four seam like spins really well. Like you should like I think that you have like a high spin rate. Like I've been reading about this, and like you should like start throwing that pitch a lot more and like stop throwing your two seam." And I just like listened to it because I didn't really even know. I was like, "Oh, that's
Okay,
interesting."
I'll give it a try.
And then I just did that, and I was like working like this and like a curveball, like a swerve off of it, and I'm like working like the up and down rather than like trying to be fine and like getting a ton more swings and misses. But essentially, like after that start, it still was inconsistent because like I basically like revamped everything, and it just took me a while to like put it together. And I think right after that start, I had like a essentially what happened was I had a midweek where I was just gonna like throw an inning in a game as like a bullpen, and in that one inning, I think I gave up like 7 runs and like was just getting destroyed. Like every ball's like it was against Minnesota, and like I remember like the first 4 batters was like walk single, hit by pitch, grand slam to start the inning, and then like it was just like after that was just like double, single, walk, and it was like I couldn't get out of the inning. Like I ended up like getting 1 out, and after that one outing, my coaches basically were just like, "Look, you've got to stop doing all this training stuff." Like after one inning, like it sucked, but I had a really good start before then. And it just kind of led me to like another battle with them, and like I still would be really inconsistent. So just like I would pitch like 1 inning here and there, and like sometimes I would strike 3 guys out, sometimes I would walk 3 guys. Still wasn't consistent. They tried to move me to like the back end because they were like, "Oh, you throw harder now. Let's move you to a closer," and like that didn't really work. So it was still kind of a battle, and then. It just took me a long time. So like I started doing all this unique training, and I like had the long-term vision, and after my junior year I ended up transferring because I realized that it wasn't going to work out with the coaches there. So I wanted a fresh start. So I ended up going back out to Driveline that summer and training, and we found a place for me to kind of play. And I'd been like, they needed me to transfer like there was like rules on transfer. Like you have to like basically like you're allowed to transfer without
This
sitting.
is before the portal and everything.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you were allowed to transfer without sitting out if you number one go to a Division two school, and then or like number one go to Division two school, and then number two like you have to play like on a certain side of the Mississippi River. It was like some weird rule. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna start looking for places to play, and Kyle basically told me that you should play in a state where there's like a lot more like where it's like more scouted or more, like there's just more, you're going to have more visibility. So I was like, all right, well, why don't we just look for like a D2 in California? So I just started blasting out emails to Division two schools. I took some videos of bullpens. By this time, I'm throwing like 90 miles an hour. Like 89 to 91, I think, like decent off speed. And I just start sending it out to a bunch of colleges, and I emailed Brett Latchman, who was the pitching coach at Cal Poly Pomona at the time, I knew they were like a pretty powerhouse Division two school. Like they had gone to the World Series a few times. They had a lot of success with getting guys drafted. And I just like I sent like probably an email to every single D2 in Colorado, in California, in Texas, and I really only got emails back from like two schools, and so not even like a metro state even really had any like interest in me at this point. They're like, this guy threw 13 innings and walked like 25 batters. Like, why would we want to bring this guy into our program? And so I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for sure, but I said it like so. Brett Latchman responds right back to me, and he goes, "Let me know next time you're pitching in a game, and I'll come watch you play." So I had a couple contacts in the California Collegiate League because that's where I had like been playing like pitching some innings. And I ended up playing for a team out there for like a month, and I was like throwing in some games. and moved down there and essentially just told him when I was throwing in an outing, and I threw like one inning and it was pretty good. I think I had like a strikeout and like I don't know, it was like a scoreless inning, like a typical inning. And he was like, yeah, like I'm really interested. Like, why don't you just come on the campus this week, and we'll take you on a little walkthrough, and you can just like meet with our coaches, and we'll offer you like a scholarship because we think that you'll be like, we can work with you. Like, we have a lot of success with Division I guys transferring here and then like figuring it out. So he took like a huge leap of faith in bringing me in, because like if you look at my freshman through junior year stats, like they're terrible. But he kind of saw the potential. He knew that I was a hard worker. The cool connection here is that Brett Latchman, he's related to Renee Latchman, who was one of the coaches with the Rockies. And Walt Weiss, this is a very small world now. Walt Weiss obviously is managing the Rockies at this time. So I called Walt and I was like, hey, could you talk to Renee, because I'm talking to Brett Latchman, who he's family with, and you have him put in a word for me. And they did that whole thing, and it was like a really weird small world baseball connection thing to how I ended up being there. And it ended up, I go on campus. I got like they get, with these Division II schools in California, I don't know the rules now, but they get like a scholarship for one out-of-state player. So they gave me that scholarship, and I went there and really just. So I go to Cal Poly Pomona over the fall. I commit there, and then I literally told this is when I like actually decided to take my baseball training to the next level, and like get to the point where like how we like trained and like how we like started training like 2016 and on was essentially just like, you have to put in just like an absurd amount of time and dedication and just like sacrifice everything. And that's what I told myself like over that fall before the spring started, was like, I'm just going to do everything possible to get myself better. So like I'm lifting 4 days a week at this point. I'm, on a full-on velocity program, like doing things the right way. I'm out in the fall, and I know that like my number one weakness, I kind of knew, was like I just needed to get way stronger. Like from my when I was going into my senior year, I weighed like 180. I'm a little over 6'3", and I weighed 180 pounds, if that. And by the time the spring started, I was like 190, 195. So I put on like 10 to 15 pounds over the fall and over the winter, because it was like the first time where I'm like, I'm going to take my diet seriously. I'm going to start lifting upper body, because like we didn't even believe in really lifting upper body until this point. So I'm starting to like, bench and, do like heavier rowing, and like just actually working out my like upper body, and like doing arms, like doing stuff overhead. Like we didn't do any of that because it was like bad for pitchers. Like that's how training was. And I think that's where like I knew I was already doing the right things with my throwing program, but I just needed to get stronger. So like those from like August to December, I just like lifted and lifted and lifted and lifted, and I just did it. And I was like, before practice, I'm like spending time on soft tissue work, and on my warm up, I'm out there an hour before practice starts. I'm, doing extra work in the weight room, because, when you're at a college, you have your team lifts. But what a lot of people don't realize is like, you're not actually addressing what you need to be doing on the team lifts. Like if you're doing a team lift and like you have team practice and like that's all you're doing as a player, like you're not going to get better. Like unless you're at like a college that really knows what they're doing, like you have to go above and beyond. So like I was going to the campus weight room and like knocking out all the stuff that I still needed to do, and spending time before practice addressing like my mobility and my soft tissue work, and after practice doing my recovery. And like I was the only one out on the field, like multiple times after practice, like everyone's back in the locker room changing and leaving, and I'm still out on the field for an hour, like doing all of my post recovery or doing all my warm up or whatever it was. Like I was the first one out there, and I was the last one to leave every single day. And it was regardless if I knew, regardless if I pitched well, regardless if I pitched bad, I just kind of, did that. And I spent the whole fall and the whole winter doing that. And about once the fall season started, so in California, obviously the school starts way later. The weather is a lot nicer than Colorado. So we're starting our fall practices in like end of October, like compared to most teams. So like when I started throwing in scrimmages, all of a sudden like my velocity is now like low 90s, like sitting. I started putting on weight. I'm dedicated to this weighted ball program. I'm dedicated to just my player development in general. And I just start throwing, I'm up to like 92 to 93, 94 miles an hour. Like my velocity went up like 4 or 5 miles an hour from my junior season to like the fall of my senior year. And in reality, it was just sacrificing time to player development and like getting stronger and, getting on a proper throwing program. It was just all the stuff that we preach. And I just dedicated my life to it. And, the fall season's going on and I'm throwing in scrimmages. And luckily at this school, things really worked out because we had there were 3 other pitchers on our team that were all like going to be drafted. They were like top prospects. And we had a couple position guys that were too. So like at our scrimmages, there's like 10 or 15 scouts at at a D2 practice. We've got 15 scouts. Like it's absurd. Like we were lucky to have like 1 scout at a Division 1 game. And that's what people don't realize too, is like if you have good players or like if you're good, people are going to go and watch you. It doesn't matter if you're at a D1, it doesn't matter if you're at a D3, it doesn't matter where you are. If you have good players on your team or if you are really, really good, people are going to come and watch you. And it was like, one of our best pitchers, his name is Ryan Olson. He was a draft pick by the Reds and he was like a Team USA guy in high school, like very, very good. My pitching coach literally says, hey, Ryan's going to pitch the first 2 innings. There's like 15 scouts here. I'm going to throw you right after him just in case anybody stays. And this is like one of our first scrimmages in the fall. And I think, obviously when there's 10 scouts, in the stands watching, your adrenaline is going like crazy.
Yeah.
And like you get like an absurd amount of, intent increase from that. And, I'm pitching and a couple guys are like packing their stuff and like leaving because they just wanted to watch Ryan. And my first warm-up pitch is like 92 or 93. And then some of them are like, oh, I think I'm going to stay and like watch this kid. Yeah. And, I go and I pitch and I think I did all right. I don't really remember, but, I threw and like after I threw, there was like my coach literally handed me like 3 or 4 questionnaires from like some MLB teams that were there. And then like progressively as the fall went on, as the winter went on, like my velo started creeping up a little bit more. I was like more consistent. And by like the season, I had like a letter from like almost every single team. And it was just crazy how it happened because like I went from literally like never pitching, like not throwing hard enough, like just thinking that I wasn't even going to get innings in college. Like I was going to quit baseball and just like get my degree and like stop playing. Like if I couldn't find a school to play at, and like I was almost at that point because like I have no interest from like CSU Pueblo at this point, or like Metro State, like teams that are good. They're D2, right. Like good baseball, like really good programs. Like nothing against them, but I was at a D1 school and like I was like I can't even get an opportunity to go play at any Division 2 school at this point. Like why would I even keep playing to now I'm pretty much going to be drafted in the MLB draft like a year later. And it was like crazy how fast it happened, but it really just went to show that it was literally velocity that gave me an opportunity. And I think that is really like a big thing for like a lot of kids to hear is like, if you like velocity is going to get your foot in the door and like give you those opportunities, regardless if you're like able to figure it out as a pitcher or not. Because if you can throw at a high velocity relative to your peer group, like you're going to be able to like at least get an opportunity. Yep. And I remember like my first start, or it was like my first outing of the spring season. I like hit like 95 or 96, but I was still like sitting like 92, 93, and that was really, really good still for like 2016. Like that was kind of very good still compared to now. And I remember I was getting like high up like people to come watch. Like I remember I had like multiple times where like cross checkers are, calling me and saying like, hey, we're bringing out like our full brass to like come and watch you pitch, and like, we really like what we see. And like at that point I was like, I kind of know I'm going to get picked like pretty high.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then June rolls around, and I really thought I was going to get drafted by the Cubs or the Nationals because they were like the two highest teams that were like going to draft me. And in reality, like I got a call. It was like the 5th or 6th round. I got a call from the Cubs, and I also got a call from the Nationals, who I thought were the two teams that were probably going to pick me. And they're like, "We're going to pick you in our like next few picks, so just like be ready." And then
Like brace yourself.
yeah. So like
I'm
I'm
sitting to the floor.
Yeah, so like June, so this is like after, I'll go back and talk about a little bit of like the D2 World Series or whatever. I mean, I pitched pretty well in that, but I'm sitting there, I just like my family and a couple of my buddies, kind of sitting there in June, and I'm just like, the Cubs are picking or the Nationals are going to pick me, and like we're just sitting there every time they pick, and like, oh, here it is, and then it just wasn't me. And then the 9th round rolls around, and the ninth round starts, and I got another call from the Cubs. They're like, we are going to pick you with our next pick, and they picked like the middle of that round, and then the Nationals were like at the end of that round because they were like really really good that year. So the Nationals were like, we're going to pick you with our next pick too, because I think like the seniors really get picked between like the 7th to 10th roundish.
Yeah.
And the Rays picked before both of them, because the Rays, I mean, it's hard to believe now, but the Rays like weren't really good. And
this is pre all everything they do now.
2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And it was like right before, it was like 2 picks before the Rays scout, who, I mean, I talked to every team, so like scouts like had my number or whatever, and the Rays scout just said, hey, we're going to select you here. Like, are you like, do you want to, like, are you like willing to, come play for us or whatever? Like, here's what you're going to get. And I was like, yeah. And then the Rays literally like 2 seconds later, it was just like Tampa Bay Rays select, Peter Bear. And I was like, it was pretty fast how that happened. Like, it wasn't kind of expected. But yeah, I mean, obviously being a senior sucks. Like, the MLB draft is like ridiculous in that aspect. But I was like a 9th round pick and like senior sign kind of guy. And then my career went into the minor leagues after that. But so my college experience was absurd, because I really just went from,
it's a roller coaster, that's for sure.
I really just went from like never really pitching and kind of just like trying to figure it out, and like being yelled at by my coaches, and like just having mental breakdowns, honestly, to like finding a new place to play, being in a really good situation, and all the training that I kind of sacrificed from like my sophomore year through my senior year just really paid off. But it took like 2 full years for me to like get to that point. And I think like that's what kind of a lot of kids that come in and like start doing a lot of this training don't realize, is like, even after that 2 years, like it took me like 4 or 5 years of like hard training to really get to my potential as a pitcher. And like, it's like an ongoing process. It's like never ending. It's like you have to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and then that's where you're gonna like see the results. Because like if I just said, I'm gonna see how this throwing program works for 1 summer, and if I'm not better, I'm just gonna stop playing. Like if I did that, like I would have never played like where I did, and like I would have never gotten to the point of where I did if I just like said I was gonna try this for even like 5 or 6 months. It was just like, it was long term. And my senior year was an amazing experience, because we got to the D2 World Series. The quarterfinal game, I had a no-hitter through 7 2/3 innings. I honestly thought I was going to throw a no-hitter my last college start. I had 7 2/3 innings. I had like 3 walks. I had like 14 strikeouts. Like I was just striking out everybody at this point. Yeah. Like I was like carving. And the 9-hitter. So I'm 7 2/3 into a no-hitter. I've got like 125 pitches too, because like I was like, this is my last college start. I told my pitching coach, like, I'm throwing, like, leave me in the game. Like, I felt like I was prepared to handle the workload at this point with like all of the training I've been doing. I don't obviously advise people to do that, but if you're in a playoff game, it's your last college start, like it's different. Like you
Yeah.
can extend your pitch count a little bit, especially given the circumstances. And I'm like 125 pitches in, and the 9 hitter comes up, and I throw a first pitch fastball like up and away, and he literally just like stuck his bat out and like hits like a ground ball that like somehow goes through the first baseman and second baseman. And I gave up a hit there, and we were winning like 2-0 right now too, so it's like an intense playoff game, like Division II World Series. We're playing at the USA complex in Cary, and pitching coach comes out, like takes me out because I'm like, if I give up a hit, just take me out because like obviously like I'm not gonna risk my career for this. And we won the game, but my last college start was like 7 2/3, 1 hit, like 14 strikeouts. It was just like it was such a surreal way to go out of my college career. Like how happy I was to do that, from starting from like a point where like my sophomore year, I'm giving up 7 runs in 1 inning, giving up grand slams, walking the house, not even throwing very fast, to like finishing my career like throwing, low 90s to mid 90s and like almost throwing a no-hitter in a World Series game. Like that's just like a complete 360 change that like I'll never like forget that experience. So
Yeah.
it was really insane.
That's about as close to like storybook as you could probably get, even if that was like,
Like I was like,
that's where it is.
yeah, not explaining it now, but like after the game, I was like, actually like, it was hard to like hold back like my emotions.
I bet. No, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So we go. So yeah, now we're 9th round pick. What is what's the minor league experience like? And there's things probably. I mean, we don't have to delve too deeply into, but like,
Yeah.
just like what was that kind of like for you?
Yeah. So essentially, it's crazy, and I don't mind kind of sharing because like it's different now, and thank God it's different because like with all the stuff that's passed through, like now minor league guys are actually going to have housing paid for. They're going to have like full contracts paid throughout their whole the whole year, because we used to only get paid like during the season, and now they're actually going to have like a decent salary. So it's awesome. But to explain a little bit about like my experience was my first year playing with the Rays in the minor leagues. I played rookie ball in the Appalachian League, which doesn't even exist anymore. It's now like a college league, and we were literally playing at like high school fields. Honestly, They were not good fields. And this league has been around since like probably since like baseball like was created. Honestly, like, it's like a very old.
You're playing. I'm like, and for people who maybe don't know what the app, it's like these are teams in towns of 2,000 people in the middle of like Virginia and like Northeast Tennessee, and there was like a good what was it? Was it on Vice, I think, where they did a whole kind of like a documentary piece on the Appy League and just like how much baseball, especially the minor league team, like meant to those communities, because it's
really cool. There's a documentary on Vice. It's pretty cool. I don't remember what.
I think you were in it. Did you make an appearance or?
Yeah, so it was called I think if you type in like Mercer Cup, I think it's called. So it's like Bluefield is in West Virginia and Princeton is in West Virginia, and every year it's like a big rivalry between these cities, and like these cities are like truck stops off the highway.
Yeah.
Like I'm not kidding.
At one time they were bustling communities, but then now as mining's become less and less prevalent.
Yeah. So
it's very like destitute communities now.
Yeah. And Vice did a whole thing on it, but essentially it's just like these towns are like places where you get off on the highway and there's like a Walmart and like an Applebee's and like a gas station and like a McDonald's, and like that's it.
Yeah.
And like and like there these like hardly anybody lives there. It's literally just these places where it's out in the middle of absolute nowhere. So we stayed at they housed us at like a Quality Inn. So I lived at a Quality Inn, and a Quality Inn in West Virginia is probably different than a Quality Inn like in Arizona, like Colorado or whatever. It's just like it was literally just like a motel. And we stayed there. We lived there for the summer. I had like a roommate in a motel, and we had to pay so our contracts at the time, I believe, were like $1,200 a month. And then obviously we and with the housing, you had to pay for like minor leaguers, you had to like pay for housing. So like the team worked out a deal with the hotel where like you could pay like it was like 30 something dollars a night out of your paycheck to stay at the hotel. So like you would get like by the time and like we're staying, 20 days more. We're staying every day because like there's no like the league, everybody's close, so like everybody's done like 5 or 6 hours. So we were never. We stayed at hotels every now and then, but most of the time we were like staying at the hotel. So like by the time I was like getting my paychecks, I was getting like $400 or $500, and that was like the lifestyle. But like I really like I loved playing, so I was like it's like they're like willing to like sacrifice it or whatever. But like the conditions were obviously like less than ideal. My first year rookie ball, I pitched really really well. I was like but it was like I was facing rookie ball is weird because like I'm 22 years old at this time and I'm pitching against like 17, 18-year old just kind of like prospects, a lot of high school guys or a lot of like international players, so like Venezuelan guys, Dominican guys, just guys that it's like they're in pretty over their head. They have a lot of talent where like they're probably going to be able to like crush the ball, but like they're going to strike out like 50% of their at bats. So like obviously being at the level that I was as a pitcher, like I dominated those leagues, and I was able to by my second year of the minor leagues move up to low A. So I was playing in Bowling Green, Kentucky with the Rays, and that team that I played on was like half of our team, more than half of our team is like big league players. Like that team I played on was like the most talented team. So like to go down the lineup, like my catcher was Jonah Heim, who's now like one of the best hitting catchers in the MLB. My first baseman was Nate Lowe, who was with the Rangers as well, like really, really good hitter. We had Mike Brousseau, who's on third base, who like was famous to the Rays for like hitting that homer off Chapman in San Diego. We had Jesus Sanchez in our outfield, who's with the Marlins, who's a really, really good player. Josh Lowe, with the Rays right now, was in the outfield as well, like really, really good player. Pitching staff, we had like Brock Burke, who is with I can go down the line with like how many MLB players were on that team. Like it was absolutely absurd, and it was like a very, very like it was like a I'm here moment for me because like I like knew that I was like good enough to play with like these super talented guys, and like just I had a little bit of a weird like at first, like the first month or so was weird because the jump from like rookie ball to low A, there's so many levels of baseball, is pretty absurd. Normally you kind of go rookie to like short season and then to low A, but I really just went from rookie to low A because they're like, this guy's just way too good to be at this level, so like let's move him up. And obviously like me, like not ever being a prospect, not ever being like a touted even really college guy, I had like heard about these guys like before I like got into pro baseball. So like I'm actually like on the same field, on the same team with these guys that are like, at first I was like, how am I here? Like it was like a moment of like I needed to like actually like realize that I belonged and that I was good enough, and it took me a while to kind of like get to that point because that season, like every single team we're playing, like I'm facing like top hitters. One of my best outings ever in the minor leagues, honestly, was that season in low A because we're facing we're in Lansing, Michigan. Lansing Lugnuts were the Jays low A team, and the Jays low A team had Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Edward Olivares, who's on the Royals, very, very good hitter. They had, I'm trying to think of all the other, a lot of the Jays players that are kind of like in that lineup now that are kind of like their young prospects were kind of like all on that team, which like one of the best. Our starter leaves the bases loaded. He's like has a tough like outing or whatever. It's like the fourth inning at this point, and I get put into the game. I'm warming up. I get put in the game. Bases loaded, no outs, and Bichette and Guerrero and Olivares are the next three batters like coming up. and my manager like hands me the ball, and he's just like,
Good luck.
he's just like, all right, here we go. And my obviously like the people around me, like Jonah, like I have real like it's literally like an MLB game at this point. Um, and I'm out there. My adrenaline is just obviously going crazy because like I'm facing like the top
Yeah.
people in baseball at this point. Bases loaded, no outs, and I strike out Bichette, Guerrero, and Olivares all back to back, and like I wasn't looking at the I guess there's a radar gun like on the scoreboard or whatever. I'm like not really paying attention to it. Sometimes I do, but in that moment it was just like I'm just locked like I don't know if I can swear on.
Go for it. You can have a reframe
fast
the whole time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was like I wanted the guest. I don't know if this is like Pat McAfee show where we can just like there.
Dude, I make sure the YouTube's marked not for children.
Okay, so yeah, I'm locked the fuck in at this point. I'm just like I don't even like I'm zoning everything else out, and I just like it's hard to even put into words. It's just like I just like hit this moment where it's just like my fastballs are just like crazy. My breaking balls are moving a lot, and strike out 3 guys in a row. And like after the inning, all the players were just like, you were just throwing like 97, 98, like you were like sitting 97, 98. And I was just like, I had no idea. And then the next 2 innings, I struck out I struck out the side that inning. I struck out the side the second inning, and I struck out the first 2 guys of the next inning, and then I gave up like a fly out to end that inning. So like, I had 3 innings against like a really really good team. 3 innings, 8 strikeouts, and like no hits, no walk. It was like just an absurd outing.
Yeah.
And like, after the game, like the Lansing reporter, I like still saved his tweet. He was like, Bear just threw like the most impressive minor league outing like I've ever seen. And, it was crazy because it was just like, I realized that I could do that, but it was like, and then like, as I and I had a decent season that year. I started as a starter, and that was the first year I kind of started moving to the bullpen. And then, I moved to high A with the Rays the next year. And, the thing that always got me a little bit was that as a bullpen guy, it's just insane how consistent you have to be, and insane how like, I could do that, but it was like I couldn't do that every day.
Right.
Like I tried my best to do it every day, but like I always struggled with like the consistency of like being in the zone all the time, like being locked in all the time, having the velocity be good, even if you have like a back to back or like, you have to throw an inning and then like a day off and then throw another inning. It's just like the grind and the consistency that these relievers perform at these elite levels, at the high levels of baseball. I admire it. Like it's insane. Like when you watch these top closers in the MLB and these top bullpen guys that are throwing every single day, not knowing if they're going to pitch that day, being able to prepare themselves, like even if like every single game they have to be ready to pitch, they have to have their preparation in check, and it's like every single day. And how hard that is absurd. With how much like I was like somebody where like I feel like I had to reach absurdly, like I had to do so much to reach my genetic ceiling, where like a lot of these guys were just like they could just do that, and like it was like almost second nature to them, where like I would throw and then the next day I'm like trying to battle like my arm isn't like feeling as good, and like I never had an injury really to my arm playing, but like it was tough to battle. Like I would have one outing where I'd sit 95, 96, 97. The next outing I'm like to 92 or 93, and it's just like I wasn't able to do it. And that was like really the way I didn't kind of progress up through the minors, was like the lack of the consistency of the day in, day out. 104, it's way different than high school and college. It's like completely different. It's like 140, 160 game season. You got to be able to throw 95 plus like half of those days. And it's
and then like your first a 7 o'clock game, you're at the ballpark at 1 o'clock, and then you don't leave till midnight. And it's
and
one of
the next day you have
like tough guys in high school and college. Like you truly don't know what it's like to be a professional guy. Like it's exactly a job. It's a
and like monitoring. monitoring your throwing intensities
Yeah.
and all sorts of that stuff, and being like, you don't know if you're going to pitch. So it's like you have to prepare yourself that you're going to pitch. But then if you like send it, like if you're doing like a hybrid A day, because you have to kind of be ready to pitch, and then you don't, and then you like have to do it again. It's like your body can't. I mean, some people can handle that, but like a lot of people like can't handle that. Like, oh, I have to throw hard every single day. Like, of course, like you're not going to be able to like sustain that, but there's a certain breed of athletes that just can do that,
Yeah.
and those are the guys that make it. And I feel like I could have gotten to that point, but it was just like the consistency and like the I walked a little bit too many guys and I should have. I just like didn't. I wasn't like consistently throwing as hard as I would have days where my velocity would be crazy, days where it wasn't, days where the slider would be really good, days where it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I did I can look back and say like, I did everything I possibly could to like reach where I could in baseball. But I just like, I can look back at my career and say like, I did what I want. Like, obviously I wish I could have pitched like a big league inning,
Yeah.
but like, I never did, but like I pitched some big league spring training games. I did everything I possibly could to develop, to reach my absolute peak of my training. And like, that's all I can do.
Yep.
And that's all I look back and I said, look, I did everything I possibly could have. And like, I just like wasn't like, I just wasn't like as good as some of those guys. And it wasn't like the talent, but it's just like, I feel like I had the ability, but it's like, it's the ability, it's the consistency, it's the day in, the day out. It's like all of these things that kind of accumulate.
Yeah. All right. So now you've finished up your minor league career, and you've been training guys at fast. You've trained guys with driveline. You've done, you've done remote programs. You've done all sorts of things. You're living in Arizona right now. And I'm interested in what your opinion is on what are the differences between guys in Colorado versus guys in Arizona.
Yeah, so in Arizona right now, there's a lot of guys that have been. I feel like they're more polished as baseball players because they're just able to obviously play in games year round.
Yeah.
And I think it's a double-edged sword, I guess, because a lot of the guys in Arizona don't really want to actually spend the time sacrificing to just be like, oh, I'm just going to go train in a facility, when like the whole year you could just go out and play in games, and like there's games going on constantly. So I feel like it's a little bit harder to kind of sell the warmer state athlete guys on like, hey, if you just like sacrifice time in the gym and just like start getting after it, over the summer, over the fall, or over the winter, you're going to get a lot better. So like a lot of things that I'm noticing with a lot of these, Arizona kids, whether it's like youth guys or guys that are like maybe before high school or kind of just, or like in high school, it's selling them on like the development aspect. And like, we know now that like, you're not going to get better as a player by, playing in games really outside of like ever. You're going to get better obviously in the weight, like by like getting stronger, getting on like arm strength programming as if you're a pitcher. Like if you're a position guy, it's probably a little bit different. But in reality, it's like these guys are, and parents are obsessive over just like, oh, we have to play in games. Like, oh, we have to play center ball. Oh, we have to, play in the winter. Whereas like a lot of people in Colorado and kids in Colorado are just coming into indoor baseball facilities because like they have to, because like there is no ability to play in games in Colorado in December. Like you physically just like can't do that. So that's the biggest thing I think with a lot of the warmer state athletes is like they're more polished as players, and like I feel like that is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because a lot of these guys end up hurting themselves or like playing way too much. Like I've seen so many position players now that are coming in with arm problems because they're a shortstop or they're a catcher that's like alternating. They're like catching one game and like playing the field the next, or like playing shortstop and then pitching one game the next. And like that stuff is just like, it's so hard on guys' arms to like play that many games over the season. And then in Arizona, the high school seasons, the games are, they have way more games. Like these guys are starting games in, the beginning of February and playing through, if they're playing summer ball, they're playing all the way from the beginning of February through, August of just playing in games and games and games, and they're playing hundreds of games. And it's just not the same, obviously, with Colorado guys, because obviously, like for a high school season, that's not starting until like the middle or beginning of March, maybe even later. Like they're not even able to get in games, and then the high school season's like 20 games or something like that, compared to these warmer states where like these guys are just like they're playing so much. And I think that's the biggest difference. And it really is hard to sell somebody on like, oh, it's it's 85 degrees in December, why would I go into a training facility?
Right.
And that's kind of the biggest difference for me is that, because that's something huge. The one negative, though, with obviously being in Colorado is, and something as a pitcher that's super important, is actually getting ball flight feedback when you're playing catch. And when you're only able to do that in a cage or do that in a training facility because the weather just like sucks, you can't get outside, it makes it difficult. It makes it difficult when you can't like actually go out and play catch with somebody. And I think it's a hidden advantage to be in a warmer place for that, because if you're training in a facility and then you're just going outside and like actually able to play catch with somebody, it's huge. So I think it's a struggle for indoor facilities to kind of figure out the best method of doing that. And I think like obviously like the Jaeger indoor stuff where you're kind of like simulating it is like your best option. But it's just not the same as like actually like knowing how far you're throwing, because like you're just playing a guessing game compared to like obviously when we would go out at the old place, we could go and like long toss the whole length of the freaking back of that parking lot and be able to throw 400 feet if we wanted to. And like that is different than like trying to simulate 400 feet into a cave. So I think like a lot of the guys in Arizona and these warmer states do have an advantage of throwing like in the winter months, because you just can't really get outside in Denver, and you can't really get outside in these colder states. So you do have I think as a player, it definitely puts you in an advantage when you can utilize it. But obviously like people and players don't really know how to utilize that. But that's the main difference, I think, is just the amount of games and the amount of like I think like the travel and the club teams is like absurd here compared to like Colorado too. It's
we hate the club culture here anyway.
It's even more. It's like if you think like slammers is bad, it's like there's 10 slammers here. It's like there's so many club teams. There's a lot more. I think there's a lot more competition. Like I know multiple high school like JV teams in Arizona that would just kill 5A varsity teams in Colorado. Like there's JV guys that are there's the talent pool is. It's a more competitive, I think, and like way better baseball environment. I think Colorado is progressing. It's definitely like way better than when we were playing. But I think like in these warmer states, you just have like the talent level at the high school level is a lot better because of how they grew up and like they just played baseball all year. And I think it's a negative in like the fact that like these guys are going to get hurt, their bodies are going to break down, they have the wrong mindset when it comes to training, but like they are, I guess, better players. So it's like it's hard to like
you say, it's that double-edged sword. It's that give and take. You're going to get better opportunities, but how many opportunities before it comes colliding down on you? What are I'm always, because you've got a weird sense of always kind of having the ear to the ground on all trends, and what are like the current trends you see in baseball players that I think guys who listen to this podcast could take advantage of and be like, okay, if I follow that trend, I can find my way into situations you've been, or like what's the future hold?
That's a good question, because now I think like everybody has access to like, and pretty much everybody knows like, I shouldn't say everybody, but I think the majority of pitchers out there at the high school level and at the college level like know what works. They know how to get on a good throwing program. Everybody's throwing plyo balls. Everybody knows that like that works now. Everybody knows like weighted ball training works now. Not like, I shouldn't say everybody, but like the majority of athletes. So if everybody is doing that, you just have to like go above and beyond in the other aspects. So it's like, before it was like, if you're doing this, you're going to get better and you're going to be better than the other, like your friends. But now it's like, if all of your friends are doing that, now you're not going to be getting better than them. So you have to find other ways. I still think like for the general high school athlete, like they have to get better at just throwing. Like there's no point of like trying to do like a unique training method if you're not like at least throwing like 85 plus yet, because it's just like until you can throw a baseball over like 85 miles an hour, like just continue to try to develop velocity and like get to that point. But like I guess once for the athletes that are already kind of in college or at that point, it's like now you have to prioritize like everything else. Like how can I get my nutrition dialed? How can I get my sleep dialed? How can I like these are the separators that not everybody's going to be doing, because all your friends, like not all of them, but like good amount of them are probably like not going to be eating the best way, or not going to be like getting the most sleep, or going out and like drinking on the weekends and like doing all of these things that like are going to be more detrimental. But if you can like, and not saying like don't have any fun, but just like for the most part, like get the basics dialed. And like I think that's still a really, really low hanging fruit for like most athletes, is like guarantee you ask them, like a lot of high school guys come in and they're like, oh, I'm freaking exhausted today. Or you just see them and they're like not awake, and it's like they slept 4 or 5 hours that night, and like that's literally like the most important part of like your body's recovery is like getting enough sleep. So it's like getting the mobility dialed, getting the nutrition dialed, getting the sleep dialed, getting like all of the things that are going to make your body feel the best. Because like I guess like if you can just consistently feel pretty good and consistently be able to actually do the training that is going to be required, because it's like really, really tough, it makes a huge difference. And I think the other thing is now we're almost reaching this era where like we preach training and working hard so much that guys are now overtraining and they're overdoing it. And this is something I'm seeing all the time, is like now it's like, if I have a 50% day, can I actually go 50%? If I have a 70% day, can I actually go 70%? Like these athletes now just like want to work as hard as possible every day. A lot of high school guys I'm seeing are trying to lift every day. Like, and they're on a program where it's like, look, we only have you lifting 3 or 4 days a week, but the other days that they're not there, they're at freaking, Anytime Fitness and like crushing arms and like doing more back squats. And it's like, now everybody's overtraining. Yeah. Everybody's overdoing it. Nobody's recovering. And I think that's like the new wave is like actually like letting your body chill, because like I honestly think that's the new wave. Is like, it sounds ridiculous, but like a lot of these college guys are just like trying to throw hard every single day. I saw we had trained somebody that's, he threw a max effort bullpen. Like I had him like, do a mound velo, like 10, 15 pitches, mound velo, fastballs only. The next day he's got recovery and he's in there throwing like almost as hard as he was the day before on his recovery day. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, my arm like still like feels pretty good. And it's like, no, like you don't do that. Like that's not like you need to like I think like, I guess to sum it up, it's like the new wave is like being on a good structure and actually following that structure. Because if you just maximize your like, give your 100% into that lift, give your 100% into like your training with like the right RPE, then like that's where you're going to see the most strides. But everybody tries to like overdo it now. and everybody's trying to like do way too much. They think that like, oh, everybody's better than me, so I need to like train every single day as hard as possible. And like that just ends up with your body breaking down, not being the best when you have to have 100% day and all the above. So it's like, honestly, I would say the new wave is mastering the basics, which is like sleep, nutrition, recovery, mobility, doing like the basics right. And then it's, actually following your RPE, following your what you're supposed to be doing every single day. Because if you have somebody that knows what they're doing programming your throwing, knows what they're doing programming your lifting, they're not going to want you lifting on your off days, and they're not going to want you sending it on plyo balls when you have a recovery day. Like that's the thing that people like don't realize is like you want to maximize. Those are in place so you can be 100% on your 100% day.
Yeah.
If you're trying to go 100% every day, that 100% day is going to be like a 90% day. And then you wonder why your pull down numbers are bad or your mound velo numbers are bad when the day before your mound velo you're stretching it out in long toss or doing compression throws or not following the throwing protocol. So I think like guys are putting themselves more at risk for getting themselves hurt and not really making the most strides because they're overtraining. Whereas when we were playing, it was undertraining. It was like we don't actually know what works and we're not doing any of this stuff that we're supposed to be doing. We're just like spending 20 or 30 minutes a day on it. Now these guys are spending, 3-4 hours every day and like doing way, way too much. It's like if you have a recovery day, like go for a walk. Like that's all you need to do. Like eat food and sleep and drink water and like, don't go to the gym and like, like people don't realize how to recover anymore.
Right.
I think that's what I'm seeing a lot.
So, wrapping it up here, what is the single? I guess if you could, I don't know how to be the single best piece of advice, but like, what's like the best piece of advice you could give to an amateur baseball player, a high school guy, a college guy, maybe the 13, 14 U guy who's right where he gets into high school? What's like your biggest piece of advice for that kind of a guy?
I always tell them that they don't realize how much time they have to get better as a player. And a lot of these guys put pressure on themselves where like, oh, if I don't get to this point by next year, like it's a failure. Or, if I have a freshman in high school who's like throwing, 75, 77 miles an hour or something like that. And he's like, oh, I want to get to 82 by my sophomore year. I need to be on varsity by my sophomore year. And it's like, you don't even realize how much time that you have as a player. Like if your aspirations are to play baseball as long as possible, you really don't even need to be reaching your potential until like later on in college, like even past your sophomore. Like if it takes you till your junior year of college to reach your potential as a player, like it can take that long. And that's what a lot of these guys don't realize, how long of a process it is and how long of a journey it is. And like I try to just enforce like just do the basics every day, put your 100% into what your programming is, and then over, the whole time you're training, and if you really do just do the basics, you put the work in, you put the time in, you're going to get a lot better. But we don't know if it's going to be 2 months, we don't know if it's going to be 2 years, we don't know. Whatever it's going to be, it's like you have so much time. It's different if you're training a junior or you're training a senior in college. But like if you are a upcoming high school guy or you are a high school guy, they think like, oh, I got to have a big time college offer. I don't want to play baseball anymore. And it's like, no, you can go to a D2, you can go to a JUCO, like you can go to a D3, and then you can keep developing when maybe your body isn't even developed yet, or like you just need to get way stronger, put on weight, and it's just going to take a lot of time. Like you have so much time. You have a lot of time, but you also like need to utilize it. So it's like if you just say I have a lot of time, so like I'm just not gonna like train, that's a different thing. But if it's like I have so much time to get better and I have so much time to reach my genetic potential, I need to take advantage of that and like just put 100% into one of my days and not think about before or after it. Just be like focused on this one rep, doing it as best as I can, and then moving on to the next one. And if you just master the boring basics every single day over time, like that's where you're going to, make the biggest improvements. So, like a lot of guys are just in a rush. I feel like with like I need to get to a college, I need to make my varsity team.
I didn't make my commitment to some random ass school before I've even played
Yeah,
a baseball game.
and like I'm like I don't like. I mean, talking about my story, it's like I didn't even get good enough to pitch really in college until my senior year of college, and like if I just would have, all I did was just put my like player development at the forefront and just try to like get better day in and day out and master the basics, and that's really how I got to the point that I did. But like, I always tell, it doesn't matter how good you are on your varsity high school team. It doesn't matter how good you are on your freshman high school team. Like, it's hard because they're living that right now, and like that's what their life is. So it's like hard to like get them to like accept that. But it really is true. It's just like, you don't realize how much time you have to get better. And if you really just you work with somebody that knows what they're doing, and you just kind of absolutely just get after it day in and day out, like you're going to make big strides down the line. And it's hard to get guys to like, to accept that, because they'll be like, oh, I've been training for a year and I've only like gained a mile an hour on my fastball. But like, who's to know, like in 2 years when their body develops more and like they get a lot stronger and they continue to do all this stuff, that they're not throwing 5 or 6 miles an hour harder, but then they just give up before they even like go for it and they try to do something different. So if you really do believe in something, it's like you just have to do the best you can day in and day out, and do all the things we talked about with like not sending it when you're not supposed to be sending it, but just mastering all of that stuff and just like realizing how much time you have. Like that's the biggest thing I see, and that's the thing that I try to preach to almost everybody I train, is like, especially if they're young. Like this is advice, like you said, for the 13, 14 year olds, for the guys that are young, even anybody in high school, honestly. Like even if you're a senior in high school, like there's so many colleges out there where it doesn't even matter. Like you can throw 80 miles an hour and play college baseball. Like there's somebody that's going to have a spot for you. And if you then spend your college years developing, like who knows where you'll be by your senior year. So yeah, you have a ton of time. That's my biggest thing. You have a ton of time. So like utilize that time to your advantage, and don't like stress out and pressure yourself if you're not making your high school team, or you're pitching bad on your JV team, or you don't have a Division I scholarship. Like it doesn't matter, and it's irrelevant to like the future of your playing career in baseball.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, awesome. Where can the people find you on social media and everything like that?
Yeah, so my Instagram is just my name. It's Peter Bear, and my Twitter is PeterBear47. I wanted my Twitter name to just be my name, but that's been taken forever since like Twitter was created, so I don't have that. But no, my Instagram is, I post a lot of kind of pitching related content on my Instagram stories. I post a lot of kind of like the same kind of mindset stuff that I preach on here on my Instagram stories, of just, progress, taking your time with everything, just kind of everything. So, and if you guys ever have, if anybody following ever has like questions about, their career as a player, or any sort of pitching related question or whatever, they can feel free to message me, and I will do my best to kind of get back to you. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Awesome. Peter, thanks for coming on the show. I know we had some technical difficulties trying to put this
Oh,
together, but hey, we got it.
It's all good.
We got it done.
Yeah, we did.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me. Good luck to you down in Arizona.
Yep. See you, man.
Good
Great.
to, yeah, good to see you.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to Pierre Bear for joining us this week on the podcast. You can follow me at Cole Thomas Fast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can follow Fast on Instagram and on TikTok at Fast Baseball. You can follow Fast Performance at Fast Performance CO on Instagram. And you can go to our website, fastcolorado.com, to learn more about everything here going on at Fast, for training, and for everything else that you may need in your development skills. We thank you for listening, and I'll see you next Tuesday.